Okay, welcome back to the show, and I've got a very special guest on the show today, a very rare guest as well. It's Mr. Tony Garea, all the way from New Zealand originally, but now residing
Yeah.
in the United States, part of the biggest wrestling company in the world for what about 40 years as well?
40 years, yeah.
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 So, Tony, look, absolute pleasure to have you on today, and thank you for
Thank
coming
you.
on the show.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. I'll start off with the generic question.
Hmm.
New Zealand, you played rugby over there as most people do.
Hmm.
How did you end up moving to the States and going into the wrestling game?
Okay, well, I played rugby when I was a toddler, and then I moved over to rugby league because at that time it was faster. Because with the rules changed in rugby now, rugby is, yeah, really fast now. So anyway, and then a couple of guys that played in the same club as I did, they wrestled. And they asked me if I would be interested in wrestling because I started working out with weights. I was a scrawny, I was the original 146-pound guy that got sand kicked in his face. So I
Yeah.
started working out and I gained a few pounds. I gained about 40 pounds. So I was up around 190 pounds and that's when I joined the club. But I had a bit of a body on me, and that was all a no-no back then. It's funny how things turn around. Oh, you can't lift weights, you get muscle bound, you won't be able to run, you can't do this, you can't do that. Christ, it used to take about four guys to bring me down, and I was under 200 pounds. So they asked me if I wanted to wrestle. I said, sure. Of course, the big question was, how much can I make? Well,
Yeah.
God, on an opening match, you could make $11. You know, and I thought, oh well, that'll help because my wage, I was a truck driver at the time, and it was only about $40 a week, as I remember.
Mhm.
So they trained me, and I started wrestling. And then the promoter over there in New Zealand, Ernie Pinches was his name, and he asked me to stop playing league because I might get hurt. And if he had me booked in the main event, on the Monday, I'd be injured. Well, I said, Jesus, I never get injured. You couldn't say back then, you just didn't say you were hurt, even if you were hurt.
Mm.
So then he didn't book me. And then he called me about a year later, and I hadn't wrestled. And he asked me if I'd like to go to Australia for 10 days. So I said, sure. And the pay was 250 a week, I think. Or
Mhm.
maybe it was 250 for the 10 days. But anyway, that was a good chunk of change back then. And then the promoter there, he asked me if I'd like to stay on. So long story short, I think I stayed 8 weeks. And then I came back, and then he said, I'd like you to come back. So he called me back about 3 months later, and and I wrestled there for about 12 weeks. And then while I was there, he asked me if I would like to come to the States. Now, I'd heard he'd asked some of the local guys in Australia if you'd like, the same thing. Would you like to go to the States?
Yeah.
And they didn't give him an answer. And he never asked them again. So when he asked me, I was ready for it. And I said, sure. Now, I'm from New Zealand. I don't have a pot to pee in. I have nothing.
Yeah.
But I managed to save some money while I was wrestling in Australia, and that was enough to buy me a round trip ticket. But I was short about $500,
Right.
so I went for a loan on my car. You'll know about this. I had a '64 Zephyr 6,
Okay.
and it was worth about $1,200 at the time. This was about 19. Well, it must have been 1971. And they denied me. I said, "Oh my God, I'm going to Australia. I'm going to New Zealand. Where the States, and I'm going to make $500 a week, and all I want to do is borrow 500." So anyway, they lent it to me. if they hadn't have lent it to me, I couldn't have gone because I couldn't afford the round trip ticket. It was like, I think, $1,200 at that time. So I thought I'd go for a year. And I went to Australia, and there was a local guy there by the name of Johnny Gray, and he came with me. So we were coming over as a tag team. And also, we went right to Florida, to Tampa, Florida, and Larry O'Day and Ron Miller were there from Australia. They were pretty high up on the cards in Australia, and they were there, so at least we had somebody, to show us the ropes. And then Johnny went back. He was engaged, and he was a little homesick, so he went back. So that left me there by myself, and I stayed on. I wasn't making any money, just making ends meet, but I was able to still save a couple.
Yeah.
Now, just a point there, my grandmother was Irish, so I think that's where the saving came from.
I was reading online and bits and pieces and trying to do a bit of research, and it said he's from Irish descent, and it says that about everyone. So I wasn't even going to bring it up.
Yeah. Oh no. And I thought my grandfather was Irish too, but he was English.
Okay.
So this is the first time I've admitted that, so I have some English in me, but don't hold
Exclusive.
that.
Exclusive.
Exclusive, yeah. I might be related to the royals. Who knows? I doubt it.
Yeah. There's no shortage of money with them.
Yeah. So that left me stuck there, and then there was a wrestler by the name of Tony Marino. I met him in New Zealand at one time, and I told him I was coming over to the States. And then while I was in Florida, he came down on vacation, and he wrestled a couple of bouts down there. And he said, "How you doing?" I said, "Oh, not that great, He said, "Well, why don't you give the promoter in Buffalo a call?" And I didn't know what the right procedure was. If you because we had territories at that time, and how do you go there? And so I talked to Eddie Graham. He was the promoter in Florida, and I mentioned about Buffalo, New York. He says, "Oh no, you don't want to go there." He said, "Let me give Vince McMahon a call, Senior." And about 3 weeks went by, and I said, "Eddie, did you get in touch with Vince?" He said, "I tried." He said, "But let me call him right now." So right in front of me, he's talking to Vince on the phone, and he booked me September 20th, 1972. I went to Philadelphia for my first television match. That's what Vince did. He brought you in. You had 6 weeks of television. So then when you went to the live events, the people knew who you were. But they also knew me from Florida because the tapes in Florida played in certain parts of New England. So that basically my start. And then my 1 year came, and I renewed my visa. So,
and you haven't looked back since.
Oh, geez, it's kind of strange, that if you told me this was going to happen, I'd say you were nuts.
Yeah. Do you ever get to go home? Do you ever get to go home much to New Zealand?
I was going home until this pandemic stuff hit. I was going home every year because I have a brother and sister there. I have nieces, nephews. I have first cousins and second cousins, and there's quite a bunch of us back there. So, it was nice to go see them. But after this pandemic thing with it closing down, opens up, and then it closes.
Yeah.
And, but I'll get back again.
Yeah, and it was very strict over.
Any younger. Actually, my sister's having a birthday today back there.
Happy birthday to her.
The 7th back there now, December 7th.
Yeah, and it was very kind of strict in New Zealand and Australia, wasn't it? Because we had kind of strict restrictions here in Ireland, but I think Australia and New Zealand were probably some of the strictest measures in the world.
Well, everything was going as norm one morning, about 11:30 in the morning, and then they got a couple of COVID pluses, and they closed everything down, and Auckland was like a ghost town. and then the big grocery stores, I think is New World and Countdown in New Zealand.
Mhm.
Um, they were all closed. They closed them all down. And then if you went shopping, you couldn't go as a family. You only went like you took the wife there, and she went in by herself. And there were police in the grocery stores, I believe, and there was one
Wow.
person in the aisle at a time. And then when they got down the end and moved over, then they let the second person in. It was as strict as all hell.
Yeah.
But and now they're still getting it. I don't know. Do you know Barbara Goodish?
No.
She's oh, I'll be damned. Frank Goodish's wife. The oh, I forgot his wrestling name. Hell of a guy too. He got killed in Puerto Rico.
Oh,
So her anyway. The reason I brought it up, I'm friends with her, and we stay in touch. We'll see each other every month probably. She lives about 70 miles from me, so we'll go up there and have have a few drinks with her and a partner, and they'll
yeah,
come down here. They were here in Cape Canaveral last week,
yeah.
and Bruiser Brody, that's who I'm
Oh,
talking about.
Bruiser Brody. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, her niece got COVID last week.
Okay.
So
Yeah. Still going.
yeah, but it's not the panic that there was.
That's
You
what I
know,
don't get.
it's absolutely bloody ridiculous. I don't even want to get the shots. My son-in-law got a shot, and he got a clot behind his right knee, and he knew what it was. So he went to
Yeah.
the hospital and got it fixed, but he could have been dead.
Yeah. It's such a weird time. I'm glad. I hope it's kind of over because it's just been kind of a nightmare few years, like hasn't it?
Yeah,
Yeah. In terms of when you were in the WWF, like you worked a lot of tag team matches predominantly in
yeah.
the early days. Was that something that you kind of carried from what you were doing in Australia and New Zealand? Or was that something that you wanted to do, or was that something that they wanted to do, or what way did it
Well,
work for you?
I think I started off as a single, of course, and then the following year, 1973, Haystacks Calhoun used to come in.
Yeah.
He'd come in for the summer,
Hmm.
and they wanted it, they always done a little something for the summer, right? So they put I was rookie of the year at I think 72. So they put me with Haystacks,
Yeah.
and we beat Mr. Fuji and Professor Tanaka for the
On the
belts.
titles. Yeah.
And then, we went around all of New England, defending the belts. And a lot of it was against Fuji and Tanaka. And I think, we were drawing some people. And I think Vince McMahon Sr., seen that. And then when Haystacks left, they brought in Dean Ho, which was who was martial arts stuff. So I had
Yeah.
somebody on my side that could do martial arts like Fuji and Tanaka.
Yeah.
So and that clicked pretty good. And then after that, the Valiant brothers came, and uh, and we had a run with them. And then I left, and Dean left, and I ended up in San Francisco for a little while. I went to Georgia for about 6 months, and that didn't work out. I went to San Francisco and was just treading water there for a year, but it was a good learning experience for me. So it wasn't a wasted year. And
Yeah.
and then came back to New York.
How much did it mean back in the day? Because I don't know how it is now, but to actually hold titles backstage, like, did you get more respect from having those belts, or was it just another thing?
No, I believe it was just another thing. To me it was always a job.
Yeah.
You know, the wrestling. You know, some guys have had gimmicks and they live their gimmicks, and then they don't go anywhere. Then when they get out in the real world, you know, it's like, well, what do I do? Well, I like doing all sorts of stuff. Even oh, I'll leave that for later, you know, because you know, we're going through this, so
Yeah. Yeah.
I'll pop
Have
it in later. Yeah.
have you any examples of people kind of living their gimmicks?
Oh, I believe so, you know, but it was part of the business. But
Yeah.
then they didn't know exactly when to switch it off, you know.
Yeah.
Like I remember talking with Randy Savage one time, you know, and he'd go through the airport and he'd have his hat on, you know. Well, he stood out like a, you know, sore thumb.
Yeah.
And he was going, oh, damn, people don't leave me alone, you know. But that was it, you know. You know, he was on top. He was making some money. And Hulk Hogan, you know, he was Hulk Hogan all the way through. Ric
Yeah.
Flair, there were a few of them, you know, but you know, it's pretty hard to do that kind of stuff. You know, I'm kind of glad I didn't have that. I could kind of sneak in.
Switch it off. Do you think a lot of people, it's kind of like being maybe a musician or something like that? It's
Mm,
when you're out in front
yeah.
of 20,000 people and then you have to kind of somehow switch off. Maybe just some guys weren't able to switch off just from the
Mm,
adrenaline and just from everything else, maybe.
yeah. Yeah. I remember one time I was having a few drinks with my boys, and a lady came over to me. She says, "Excuse me." She said, "Are you Tony Garea?" I said, "Yes." And she turned around. Her husband was over. He said, "Yeah, Timmy, Timmy, Timmy." You know, and then he came over. And he was a cop from a neighboring town. And he used to tell me, him and his brother, they'd go to sleep because the wrestling came on at midnight out of New York. We were living in Connecticut at the time.
Yeah.
And him or his brother would go up and turn the antenna, you know, to get the signal. And then they'd watch the wrestling. Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah. Well, I was just looking through some of your matches and some of your various opponents, and I was like, what was
Mhm.
Bam Bam Bigelow like to work with? So I heard from a lot of people, you know, that he was a really kind of tough guy outside the ring as well that would kind of look out for the boys and everyone.
Mm. No, I never had any trouble with him. You know, uh, I think maybe he probably used to watch me before he got in the business. You know, so now he's working with an old timer. He said, "I better take care of this guy." But I didn't have problem. You know, some guys they've mentioned, you know, having problem with guys. You know, there was I was talking to who? I was talking to somebody a few months ago, and they watched me and Superstar in Philadelphia. He said, "You guys, you know, you had a pretty tough match down there." I said, "No, it was just, you know, regular match." He says, "It looks like you guys were putting it to each other." But I said, "Well, that's good.
Yeah,
That's the name of the game." Yeah.
yeah. Competitive nature as well, and sometimes maybe that can happen.
Mm. Well,
Yeah,
I was fortunate enough, you know, to be in an era where I was wrestling, you know, the old timers, like I'm talking Stan Stasiak, even Mr. Fuji. I learned a lot from them, Professor Tanaka, Ray Stevens, you know, you're just fantastic. Killer Carl Cox in Australia. I wrestled him a few times. So, you know, they were the old timers. They knew the business, so I let them, you know, lead.
yeah,
You know, and I'm saying, oh my God, you know, where are we going here? You know, but I learned so much.
yeah,
Baron von Raschke. Oh my God,
yeah,
yeah, you know, these guys are just way up there in my book.
yeah. And then it kind of flipped, and you
Mm,
were that guy with guys like Bret Hart coming in and people like that.
Yeah.
What was that experience like from the transition to
Oh, that,
now you're looking after the younger guys?
yeah. No, that was good if they would listen. Like
Hmm.
I had some guys. You know, I talk to them, roughly about the match, and we go in there, and they go off and be doing something else and completely lose it. Like they, there's like no psychology in the match. You know, it's got to be, well, I'm a tough guy, which you're a tough guy when you're on top. When you're beaten down a little bit, then you're cut, because I was always a face, so these heels.
Yeah.
Ray Stevens, damn it, he beat me in the garden. I still remember this. And he was down. He had his arm, he had his head resting in his arm on the mat, you know. And I'm there, I'm just shaking my head, I'm disgusted with myself, you know. I'm showing the people I kicked the bottom rope, I hit the turnbuckle with my hand, you know, Broadway. And and Ray's just down there, and he's kicking his foot, moving his foot, and he's out of it completely, you know. And then he looks up and he sees me standing there, and he jumps up and he's on his knees and he backpedals into the turnbuckle.
Corner.
This is Madison Square Garden. I can give you the whole damn match. And then, I put the boots to him. He gets up and I beel him out of the corner, and when he stands up, I drop kick him, and he goes over the top rope. That made me look like a giant killer. Yet
Yeah.
he just beat me, and people probably forgot all about the thing they're going to remember. You should have seen Tony. He beat the crap out of Ray Stevens after the match. Yeah, stuff like that,
Wow.
and it's gone. It was so damn easy.
Yeah. And how much, like, when you guys were getting ready to do a match back in the day, like, how much creative kind of freedom would you get, like, to work between yourselves for your matches?
Well, it just depends who we were working with. Who was.
Mm.
I remember working with the Samoans, and Gino Monsoon was the agent, and he said, blah blah blah, we want this many minutes, and I forget who went over. So I looked at the Samoans. This is the first time. This was with Rick Martel,
Right.
and we just looked at each other. Nobody said anything, and I was the, I'd been there for a few years, in and out. So I laid a scenario down for them, you know, and I said, if you like it, if you like what I just said, let's do it. So they said, yeah, brother, yeah, we like it. And we went out there and did exactly that, and just blew the house apart. It was great. They loved
Yeah.
it. We loved it. But it could have gone a different way, and it would have been,
Yeah.
septic tank.
Yeah. So it was depending on who you
Horrible.
were working with.
Yeah, yeah. Just I like a couple of times. I won't say I had to put my foot down, but I said, hey, like, had the match, thinking, well, these guys should know how to have a match, and I was wrong. And I came out and I just said to the guys, I said, hey, that's not the way to do it.
Yeah.
I said, we're not going to do it that way, you know. And then when we straightened it out, it was great, and we had a great run. This was with another team.
Yeah.
It's easy.
And
Mm.
yeah, did your kind of creative thoughts behind the business lead into what you've done in the later years by being a road agent in the WWF?
Mm.
Was that something that you wanted to do, or how did that decision come about?
Well, I don't know. Like, I was on the, I think that was 87, so I would have been 41 years old then, I think, if my math is right. So, I was. it was kind of all over. The other territories were being closed on. Vince was uh, getting all the
taken over.
talent, and there was really nowhere for me to go other than go back to New Zealand. And Chief Jay Strongbow, who was an agent, and he helped Vince quite a bit, back when everything started. And he had great psychology and just simple stuff, and I learned so much off him. But he put my name out there to be an agent, and I was a little like, oh, I don't know if I can do this, because I'm one of the boys, but now
Yes.
I'm not one of the boys. But anyway, I try to keep everything light, with them. And some of the younger guys, I'd watch their matches, and then I'd find a little bit of a hole somewhere, and I suggest something, and I almost had to beg them because they'd say to me, Tony, I don't think that's going to work. So I talk a little more, and then I said, do me a favor. Next time, we have this match, I said, try it. And if it don't work, just forget I said anything. So anyway, this one particular guy, he did it, and it worked. I knew it was going to work. It was just a simple thing, instead of somebody putting a headlock on you and you just get them off right away, you don't make anything of it. I was sure talking to him, telling him how he could make a big production out of a headlock.
Yeah.
And anyway, he did it and it worked. And then he came in and he started. He was looking for me and I was hiding from him. I was playing a game with him, and then he found me. He said, "Did you see it?" I said, "See what?" He said, "What we talked about." No, no, I didn't see it. No. I said, "How was it?" He said, "It worked. It was great." And 20 years later, I bumped into him, and he still reminded me of that. So it was really quite good. That. But he listened. These guys are in the business, for 6 months, or, and they think they know more than somebody who's been in the business for. I don't know everything,
Yeah.
and I guarantee you, if I watch uh, matches, I still can learn something.
Yeah. I'd say the business is kind of changed a lot in that regard to what it is
Oh,
these days,
yeah.
you know?
I have a hard. I'll be honest. I have a hard job watching. You know,
Yeah.
um, the best talent I think that the WWE has is the Samoan boys. Pretty much all
Hmm.
of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd
The
agree with that.
timing is excellent. It's great, but I kind of call it a spot fest.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah,
you wouldn't if you think that's a spot fest, you should check out AEW. That's
yeah.
that's a
Oh, yeah. I think
really
I've seen a couple of those, and I'm kind of like why the heck are they, trying to outdo the WE? Well, if you can jump 3 feet, I can jump five.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
Why? And I whether it worked or not, if you got a couple of guys in, no fancy bodies or anything, but good skills on the mic and skills in the ring, and just have maybe 8 of those guys and a little bit old time,
yeah,
old school.
yeah,
And I'm sure it'd take a while, but I'm sure it would get over.
yeah. How full
Slowly.
on?
It's just like
Yeah.
even I watch something, like I watch a rugby game. I watched a rugby game the other day in New Zealand and somebody. I think I think it was a little bit back, but it was like you want to see the underdog get a try. I mean, that's what I,
Yes.
and so I can't not walk away. I've
Yeah.
got to watch because I don't know, what the outcome was, So I've got to watch to see if they can be beat.
See who won. How full on was it being a road agent compared to a wrestler? Did you have to be there for every show, or did you have to be there for house shows, or what did the role exactly entail for people that might not
Well, it
know?
was actually traveling to the house shows, and at the house shows, I was the go-to guy, for
Mhm.
anything that happened. Well, it wasn't just me, There was Jack Lanza, there was Strongbow, there was Arn Anderson, um, Fit Finley, and uh, and a few others, So if a decision had to be made and you were there, like even traveling Europe one time, we were in Germany, and I was there with Jerry Briscoe, good friend of mine, who's a day older than me, and so he's the old man of the crew. So I said, Jerry, we were going to Berlin. I remember that, but there was a big accident on the autobahn.
Okay.
So I said, Jerry, I said, if we keep going like this, we're not going to make it. You know, I said maybe there's a railroad station or an airport. So we talked to the local guys there, and there was an airport. So we went to the airport, and I think it was an 8 o'clock show, and we got there at like 8:15 or something like that.
Wow.
Even taking the plane, but it was a decision we had to make. Of course, when it got back here to the States, well, why'd you take the plane? Well, we wouldn't have made it. Would have had to cancel the show because there wouldn't have been anybody. I think two wrestlers left ahead of us because they had interviews, but they left early in the morning and they were in cars. I think that was it. So anyway, they weren't there because if you're not there, you've got a better idea about what's going on, right?
Yeah. And what did you have to call Vince and explain that to him, was it?
No, no, that was Jerry. He was the head agent then,
Okay. So he had to
So
make the call.
yeah, he had to make. But what did I've done stuff too. Oh yeah, we were in Bangor, Maine, and we got to go to Halifax.
Okay.
But we have to catch a plane from Bangor and go south to Boston and catch a plane there and fly to Halifax. Now there's a huge snowstorm in Boston, so the airport's closed. Montreal, there's a huge snowstorm, which we were going to the next day. So anyway, I talked to I think it was Pat Patterson, and I said, Pat, we're stuck here in Bangor. It was beautiful. It was like I think 32, 31 degrees Fahrenheit.
Yeah.
Beautiful blue sky, just cold as hell. I said, but I called Northwest and I asked them to get a plane, to put on 27 wrestlers, average weight 270 pound with baggage, so they know what to get. Anyway, we end up getting two small planes and flying into Halifax. And then the next day, we just continued with our regular flight into Montreal. But
Wow.
that was a decision I had to make. So
Yeah. Interesting. And you've done that right up until 2014. Is that correct?
2014 or 2013, yeah.
Yeah. That's an
I,
awful,
I
that's a really long time.
yeah. Well, I was. Let me see. I think it was 25 years as an agent, and I think 16 as a wrestler over here full time. But I had my first wrestling match in October, beginning of October in New Zealand in 1969.
Do
So
you do
go
you
ahead.
think that do you think that by kind of bowing out of the competitive aspect of wrestling early-ish in your career that you kind of saved your body a little bit, or do you have any memories of maybe any bad? Have you ever picked up any bad injuries? And do you think you came out of it at the right time? Because you see a lot of guys now and they're in bad shape from wrestling, bad backs, bad knees. Like how's your health after all the years?
Yeah, good. As a matter of fact, the worst I had was a pinched nerve in my neck, and I had the vertebrae twisted, and I've got no idea how I did it. I know I took a belly to back suplex in Japan, but that was that was a good few months um, after I took the belly to back, and that might have did it. I don't know, but I went to my doctor, who was a friend of mine, and he said I'm going to set an appointment up with a neurosurgeon. So I said okay. So I had to wait about 3 weeks, and I had this pain in the middle of my right shoulder blade, down my right tricep, down my forearm to my two fingers on my right hand, the
Yeah,
index finger and the middle finger. So, like these two fingers,
yeah.
natural fingers.
Those two.
Yeah. So, he put me on muscle relaxers and pain pills. And that was about the last time I took any medication.
Really?
And, nothing happened. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. I had a tension thing around my neck, hanging off the door with about 10 pounds of water in a plastic bag. And I'd sit there for an hour every night. Didn't help. Finally, I called a chiropractor friend of mine that was in New Jersey, about 160 miles away. And I asked him if I could come down. He said, sure, come down after I close. So I drove down there and he x rayed me and he showed me what was going on. And then he stretched me, put me, on a flat bench with a harness around my neck. And it just, yeah, like this. So I went there for about 5 or 6 minutes, and then he cracked me like that, and the pain went away, but the damage was already done to the nerve. And I'm only about 98.75 healed after all this time. But that put me off medical doctors. It's like, Jesus Christ. You know, like, I mean, if you took an x ray, you could see something was wrong.
Mhm.
If I had gone to him, I wouldn't have had any injury. As a matter of fact, I was capable of doing 110-pound dumbbell presses in the gym. And when I went back, I said, let me start with 35 pound. And my left hand went up, and my right hand never left my shoulder.
Wow.
I was like, holy Christ. I just didn't have any strength in it. Yeah,
You've
but
kind of you've
I got
came
it
out with
back.
this unscathed. You've kind of came
Yeah.
out with this unscathed then, really.
Mm.
Yeah.
But you talk about injuries and knee injuries and stuff. Never had any of that. I tweak a knee once in a while, but I just ice it down and wake up in the morning and forget about it, and it was okay. But I was walking down the street about 18, 19 months ago, and I looked over my left shoulder, and I sprained the ligaments in my left knee. I
Wow.
felt them go. All the rugby league I played, and
Wrestling.
tackles I took and wrestling and shit, nothing. And I thought it was a meniscus, which they go in there and they go click, 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 and you come
Yeah.
back the next day, and they take the bandage off, and you go next week and they pull the stitches out, and you're right as rain. It took me 14 months to have it come uh, at about 95%. And I've been
Wow.
nursing it, and I go to the gym and do leg extensions and free squats, but I'm not as young as I used to be. I don't know if you noticed that.
That's the part of life as well, you know.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah, I know, but I got guys my age. Christ, they look way older than me.
Yeah.
It's like I heard the other day, the weather, the guy that invented the weather chill factor is 83, but he feels like he's 95.
Just a couple of people I got to finish up this podcast on that you
Hmm.
might have stories or worked with over the years.
Okay.
Obviously one of them is the Undertaker. People
Mhm.
say ultimate professional, ultimate locker room leader, etc. Did you find him much of a help when you were doing those roles, kind of backstage roles in the WWE? And did he kind of keep the ship together when he was there?
Oh yes, it definitely. If you done anything out of line, you'd have to answer to the Undertaker. You know what was great about him? He was having a he was having a match with Yokozuna, and I watched the whole thing, and then there was a little bit of a hiccup in part of the match, and it changed the rest of the match. And came backstage, and he was telling me this. There was a little hiccup there, Tony. He said, "Did you see it?" I said, "Yeah." He said, "Where was it?" He had no idea what it was. I said, "When you did this, and then you went there, you know, that's when it kind of mashed potatoes." So he
Yeah,
said, "Oh my God, yeah." So he changed that the next night and made the world a difference. But it was great, that he listened. He didn't say, "Well, what the hell? He's an old timer. What does he know?" But he did listen. But he came in on the cusp of the old timers, and uh, can't say enough about Chief J. Strongbow when he was an agent. He helped a lot of guys.
hmm
Just the psychology of everything.
yeah. Do you remember
So
Undertaker's first match was against Mario Mancini?
yeah, I don't remember that. It's funny, and I used to put those matches together. Yes, and
Yeah,
that was part me and Rene Goulet, and I'd bring, if we were up in New England, I'd bring Mario in, and a bunch of other guys. It was down in Baltimore. There was Dwayne Gill, and he'd have a bunch of guys,
yeah,
Charlotte, and I was responsible for getting them there. And then Renee and I had a book, and we write the matches down, and then we'd go back to make sure that nobody worked with the same guy, wrestled the same guy within a 3 month period, you know.
yeah,
But some of those guys, like Dwayne Gill, you know, he was on TV more than the superstars.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, have you got any stories about working with Vince Jr.?
No, not really. I just I've always been a guy. I never get too close to the. I just don't like it. Like
Yeah, yeah,
I'll do what I have to do. I'll do what you want me to do. And I know one time Vince, we were in the garden and we had all tag team matches, and we were watching the matches. He said, "Tony," he said, "why don't we have a singles match between the tag matches?" I said, "Vince, they're all tag matches." And he booked the bloody thing. That was kind of comical, but he's my birthday is about 4 weeks after his, but he's a year older than me,
So
and
him and Gerald are
he
both
told
older.
me once or twice, on my birthday, even since I left too. So
That's
that's
a nice
pretty good.
touch.
Hey, I gotta give my All Blacks a little bit of a
Bit of a
hit.
shout out.
Yeah, a bit of a shout out.
Yeah.
I had this made.
I was reading a story, Tony, and we'll finish up on this one about
Hmm.
you going into the Hall of Fame. And
Hmm.
I was looking on a website earlier, and it's basically kind of a fan wrestling forum, and it goes through do you think X, Y, and Z should be in the Hall of Fame? And I seen on your one, 2,600 votes, and 99% of people say that you should be in the Hall of Fame. But I know I've heard a story. I've heard a story before about you missing a call or something like that. So, do you
Yeah.
want to clarify what that is? And would you like to go into the Hall of Fame?
Oh yeah, it would be very nice, As Spike Milligan said, it's about bloody time. But yeah, I think that call. They were doing a show in Buffalo, and I was in New Zealand at the time, so I wasn't getting calls.
Yeah.
I got my phone over there. I used the phone, for over there. I don't have an international thing. I don't even know if they had it back then. But anyway, I got a message when I got back home. So I called in and I said, well, I was in New Zealand, but I think it was too late. So I just missed the call. And that must have been 7 or 8 years ago, maybe even more. I don't know. But then I was talking, they were trying to get my number. And as one of the office people I know, and we stay in touch, and they asked me if it's all right to give, the cell number. This was about a week ago, but
Oh,
nobody's
wow.
calling me. So if they don't call soon, they're just going to miss out. You know,
Yeah.
I'll make,
But
I'll make my own Hall of Fame.
it's December now. The wheels are going to start moving soon. So who
Yeah,
knows? Who
yeah.
knows? We might see you in there maybe next year. That'd be cool.
Well, before I die.
You've got miles on the clock
Yeah,
from
well,
being an agent.
yeah, I tell you though, but a lot of my buddies, even in New Zealand, I go back and I got to see. It's almost scary, as I say. If if Tony gives you a call and, and wants to come around and see you, don't do it because most of the people he sees have passed away after he visited them. But uh, that's life.
Yeah, yeah.
Who
Is
knows?
the
Even yeah.
is the convention world something that you're involved in, Tony, or have you made any kind of appearances like that? Because it's such a huge thing over in the States now.
What is that?
The convention world, where these guys come in, do
Oh yeah, yeah,
autographs, pictures, that kind of thing.
yeah. Yeah, it's pretty big here. I've been to a couple, but I'm down in Florida, and the price of air tickets, and for them to get people up there, and like there's a few guys, um, if I know about it, like, and it's up north, then I'll go up north because I have, my kids are up in Connecticut. I'm down in Florida, so I'll go up there, and I'll kill two birds with one stone, and you know,
Yeah.
uh, but it's kind of nice. I went to one in Charlotte, and there was one guy. He came, oh, hey Tony, how are you? Good to see you. I hadn't a bloody clue who he was, but he lost about 60 pounds. That's why, you know.
Wow.
And then I figured it out, a little later on. But it's good to see some of the old timers because I don't stay in touch with a lot of guys. There's only 4 or 5 guys, and then the guy that we used to meet for a beer about 4 times a year, Timmy White, one of the referees, he
Yes.
passed away,
Yeah.
which was a big shock. I was like, holy Christ.
Yeah. I was actually only talking to him maybe a couple of weeks beforehand because Tim
Mm,
was going to come on the show here, and he was going to
mm,
talk about the way he used to run an Irish bar and
mm,
things like that. We're going to talk about stuff like that because we aren't just going to dive into wrestling completely.
yeah.
But from the little exchanges I had with him, he seemed like a lovely guy.
Oh, he was fantastic. And he didn't pull any punches.
I seen
Like,
that from his Facebook posts.
yeah. Yeah. It's like, all right, but him and I, we used to go at it. People thought we hated each other, but we'd do anything for each other. And then his little bar, up in Rhode Island that he had, him and Mike, his partner.
Yeah.
And I used to pop up there once in a while. And then me and my sons had a bar for a little while, and my daughter. And he came down there. you know. He was good, you know.
Yeah.
Bloody shame, you know. It's just like,
Young man as well at the time.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. And then what's his name? Uh, Brian, is it Brian Hebner?
Oh yeah, they died so close to each other. I think within like a
Mm.
week or something. Yeah, it was crazy.
No, 2 days.
2 days, was that it?
Yeah,
Wow.
I think 2 days, two referees. But no, not Brian. David. Dave.
Dave. Yeah.
Yeah, Brian is Earl's son,
Yeah.
but um, yeah, but Dave wasn't in good health.
hmm Tim was more
Yeah,
sudden, I think.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Yeah. So,
Yeah.
but according to the doctor, I'm in good health because I had my 3 yearly physical, which is a pain in the ass over here. So now I've got to have a physical every year because that's what the doctor says, whether I need it or not. You know,
Well,
it's it's
I'll
like
I
bloody
I'll end it by saying that let's hope he clears you for April this year, and we'll see
yeah.
what happens.
Yeah, well, I went to the doctor a few years ago. He says, Tony, he says, I give you 6 months to live. I says, well, what if I'm still alive in 6 months? He says, well, come back to me. I'll give you another 6 months.